Welcome to Prime Life. We call it Retirement 2.0. Leave each episode with tips and new ideas to help you navigate retirement in our new age. It's your time. Make it count.
This podcast is for educational purposes only. It is not intended as medical, investment, or financial advice. We do not sponsor or endorse any of the individuals, companies, products, or services featured on this podcast. Any statements or opinions expressed are of the individual who makes them. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Hi, this is Paul Tyler, and welcome to another episode of our Prime Life podcast. Joseph, good to see you.
Excellent to see you, Paul, and the team.
Yeah, Laura. Yeah, Mary, we've got a great topic today and a great guest. Do you want to do the honors?
I would love to. Thank you, Paul. So today we have Alyse Dunn. She's the founder of the tech startup CareCopilot. CareCopilot is an app that answers the questions that you don't even know to ask when you're taking care of an older adult. Alyse, tell us a little bit about yourself, why you created this app, and anything else that you want to share about us. Share about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. So I started CareCopilot in late 2021 with one purpose: to make it easier for people to take care of their older loved ones, like their aging parents, grandparents, you name it. And that's exactly what CareCopilot is. And I started CareCopilot, and I'm really committed to that mission because I have personal experience with this problem of taking care of someone who is older and needs help. I have one sister, and together we took care of both of our aging parents, one right after the other, for a total of 8 years before they both passed away. And it was absolutely brutal. And there was so much that we didn't know, so many questions that we didn't even know to ask. And in those 8 years, we just never found a solution and we never figured it out. So I left my job as a senior software engineer at Venmo just to build a digital solution that could help others navigate caregiving more easily than we did. And that's exactly what I did.
Well, let me start first off, Alyse. We've read so much about AI, so much about its potential to, be an assistant, a whatever, for somebody who's needing help. And having gone through the experience you went through myself, it's horrible, and you feel like you're doing it all by yourself. If you were to take your app and and turn it into a person or one of these avatars, like I think Replica does, what would it look like? How does it feel? What's the emotion? And what is it? What is this person like if this were a human being helping me carry me through my journey, helping somebody else?
Ooh, that's a really interesting question. There are a few words that come to mind to describe that avatar. One is understanding. There is a myriad of emotion that arises when you're taking care of someone who you care about, usually someone who at one point took care of you. And admittedly, a lot of those emotions are challenging. There's a lot of anger, a lot of resentment, a lot of regret. And a lot of people who are going through this, who I collectively refer to as friend and family caregivers, they have trouble even expressing that and sharing that because they're not sure if they'll be understood. They're not sure if they'll be supported. And so, that avatar that you described, I see that avatar as being very understanding, very authentic, and most of all, helpful and knowledgeable, because as I said, there's just so much that you don't even know to ask when you're going through this. And when so many friend and family caregivers are going through this, the main things that they want are to be seen and heard and understood, and they want guidance on what they should be doing.
Alyse, I want to maybe help our listeners understand your product a little bit better. So on your website, you talk about community, rewards, and service. Can you maybe explain what your product is actually doing in those three areas?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go to carecopilot.co and sign up, you start by answering just a few 3 basic questions about yourself and your loved one. From then, there are a lot of different things that you can do in the app today and a lot more that's coming. One is if you live in the New York City area, you can book some key services that can take a few things off your plate when you are taking care of someone. Services like in-home care to send someone to your home to take care of your loved one, or legal services, because as a lot of friend and family caregivers find out the hard way, you actually can't make a lot of medical, financial, or legal decisions for your loved one without an attorney to draw up a power of attorney to, give you that privilege of helping them out in that way. So that's the services aspect of CareCopilot. And that's really sort of the star of the show when it comes to CareCopilot. But in addition, there is an anonymous community of friend and family caregivers who talk to each other and offer each other support, and support in a tangible way. Like, this is an adult day center near me that I sent my loved one to that's really helpful. Or this is the medication that my mom is taking for Alzheimer's and we've had mixed results for it. So there's also that community aspect. And then finally, there is a rewards feature in CareCopilot. As we know, caregiving is a bit of a thankless job, and it can be a really long journey. The average person spends 4 years taking care of a loved one. One can earn a college degree in that time. And at the end, it's done, and there's no thank you for that, aside from, of course, the intrinsic emotional rewards. And so with CareCopilot, you can earn rewards for doing things on behalf of your loved one, like securing that power of attorney or filling out this little cost of care calculator that we have to help you calculate how much financial support your loved one might need. And families can earn rewards for that and either cash them out for a gift card or use them for a credit on services that they purchase.
So you talked a little bit about not knowing what you don't know until you need to know it, and then you still don't know it. So I was going through a bit of your TikTok account and going down the community path and the community angle. There was a video that caught my eye because it seems like it may be a simple thing when in fact you don't know what you don't know. So if for that example, it was the overnight bag packing. What other things have you found, or what type of community conversations have you either been able to start or continue using social media in that way?
And we'll get that answer after a brief word from our commercial sponsors.
NASA is always working harder to be your carrier of choice. We offer insurance products that can help you meet your retirement goals, such as protecting your savings, securing lifetime income, or paying for healthcare costs. We're dedicated to providing best-in-class service and are keeping things simple, and we'll have your back. We have around 400,000 policyholders and contract holders and have been doing this for a long time, 170 years, but we remain humble enough to always try to improve. For more information, visit nfg.com. NASA insurance products are issued by Nassau Life and Annuity Company of Hartford, Connecticut, Nassau Life Insurance Company, East Greenbush, New York, or Nassau Life Insurance Company of Kansas, Overland Park, Kansas. Subsidiaries of Nassau Financial Group. Products are not available in all areas. Policyholder counts are for all Nassau companies as of September 30th, 2022, and are subject to change.
Coverite is the first digital concierge health insurance platform focused on Medicare. Their mission is to make Medicare more transparent and accessible for America's 60 million Medicare beneficiaries. By simplifying a traditionally confusing and complex decision, Coverite delivers a simple, seamless, and hassle-free plan selection and enrollment experience. Try the Coverite platform and see for yourself why they've been referred to as the TurboTax for Medicare. Visit coverite.com/podcast to learn more.
Yeah, absolutely. So something that comes up really frequently in the conversation around caregiving is the financial aspect of caregiving. And so something that comes up a lot in the CareCopilot community and just in my conversations with folks is educating about frankly, just how expensive this is and what means you have for financial support. So to throw a few numbers your way, 1 in every 7 people are taking care of an adult loved one over the age of 18. 1 in every 7. So that's spouses, parents, grandparents, you name it. On average, each family is spending about $15,000 a year, every year out of pocket on care. And that can be on legal fees, in-home care, you name it. It's really quite expensive. And the biggest unpleasant surprise amongst families who are navigating caregiving is the fact that Medicare, which we know is the largest health insurance payer for people over age 65, Medicare more or less does not cover the cost of a nursing home or another senior community or in-home care. Families are on the hook for paying that, and it can be upwards of $25 an hour. And again, this can go on for, on average, 4 years. And so something that we discuss a lot in the community is what the real options are out there for financing care. And unfortunately, there aren't that many, but I will share the top ones. If you are a regular middle-class family and you have someone who needs care, there are a few different ways that you can finance it, but admittedly, just because of policy problems, all of the options aren't that great. Option 1 is if you're taking care of a veteran. There are certain veteran benefits programs that can put upwards of $1,000 a month in your pocket to help pay for care, and that's a great option. Another option is if your family is low income or if you spend down your assets to a point where you become low income. Medicaid, a different health insurance payer, does do a pretty good job of picking up the bill for there. And Medicaid will pay for in-home care and senior community care and whatnot. And then, one other option is that as a family member gets to the end of life, hospice also does a really good job of providing low cost and no cost care, but that's not until the very end of life. So those are 3 realistic and achievable and accessible options for helping pay for care. But otherwise, unfortunately, a lot of families are just on the hook and, struggling to make ends meet and pay for their loved ones'
Alyse,
care.
what's the number 1 or 2 things that you learned that you would like to kind of amplify for our listeners that they should really know when caring for a loved one?
Yeah, absolutely. So number 1 is the one that I just touched on, which is that I wish that I had been more knowledgeable about the cost of caregiving and what my financial options were. So one really practical anecdote is as follows. My sister Lisa and I took care of both of our aging parents, and we nearly bankrupted ourselves doing so. I actually cashed out the last of my personal savings, a few $1,000s, to pay for my own father's funeral. It was that bad. And as our parents were deteriorating, me and my sister Lisa would, of course, because we loved our parents, we wanted to help, we would just go ahead and pay all the bills that we could. In retrospect, that was actually not the best strategy. A better strategy would have been to leverage our parents' somewhat meager savings and paid all of these bills through those savings so that we could spend down their assets, get them on Medicaid more quickly so that Medicaid could pick up the tab from there. So that's one pretty practical, nitty-gritty strategy that we didn't execute on very well that I always share so that others can do a little bit better than we did. So that's one. The other one is a little bit less tangible. Looking back, I really wish that I had more perspective on just how many people are taking care of an adult loved one, that 1 in 7 figure that I mentioned. It's really interesting how in our culture, people are generally pretty open about their childcare responsibilities and the joys and challenges and struggles of taking care of children. Taking care of older adults, it's also quite common, but it's also very silenced. A lot of people are struggling in silence. And I really wish that I had been more forthcoming about the challenges that my family was facing so that I could have gotten more support and felt a little less alone and less angry as I was going through that process.
Yeah, you've hit a couple of kind of interesting themes. Laura pulled on one of them, knowledge. You mentioned payments. We've talked to a lot of people who talk about the challenge of not only protecting the savings, the seniors, making sure the money goes to the right place, they aren't subject to elder abuse. You raise a really interesting topic of marrying the financial planning process with their pocketbook and their needs. Maybe you could just sort of talk a little bit. How should these things come together? In the future, what will your Copilot look like? 5 years from now.
Yeah, to be honest, I think a lot of that is going to depend on policy. Right now, we don't have the government structures in place to provide a lot of financial support to families. I always make the joke that I hope that at one point that changes and there's less of a need for CareCopilot, because having a sound financial structure and financial resources as you go through this caregiving journey, it can absolutely change a lot. It doesn't solve all problems, but it does make everything quite a bit easier. So to that end, I'll say that hopefully we have some policy changes, and that's not something that CareCopilot will necessarily need to lean into. But until then, it's probably going to look like a lot of detailed guidance on some of the things that I mentioned about what financial resources are actually available to the average middle income family, and then helping folks capitalize on those resources. So maybe helping them apply for the VA benefits or apply for Medicaid.
So, clearly finding support, finding resources is an enormous benefit. So any other, category of knowledge where you said, wow, if I'd only known this before I started doing this? It sounds like one was order of paying bills, which accounts to deplete. Was there anything else on that list where you said, that this is just something people should know that they don't know, that we're going to make sure they know by the time they're through our program?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll tell you a short story. So as my dad was declining, I realized that it was time for me to take over his finances. And so I went over to the credit union where he had his accounts. And I even had the foresight to take my ID, his ID, my birth certificate to prove that I was his daughter, and a few other pieces of information so that I could get access to those accounts. And so I go to the branch manager. She was very kind, but also very firmly told me that there was absolutely no way that she could give me any information about his accounts because I didn't have a power of attorney in place. I was 26 at the time. I didn't even know what a power of attorney was or how to get it. And so that's the other thing that comes up where, I think that it's hard to even know or, to think about the fact that, oh yeah, if mom or dad are, maybe less so for a spouse, but maybe depending on how those accounts are set up, rightfully so, you can't just go in and take over that stuff. There are legal procedures that are rightfully in place to protect, nefarious characters from doing bad things. And so I wish that I had had the foresight to get all of that done in advance. Because what happened in my case is that I then went back home. Me and my sister Lisa immediately started calling up all of these elder care attorneys. And it took several months to then find an attorney, get the durable power of attorney in place, take that back to the bank, and, everything that we needed to do from there. So that's another one that I like to alert people about as something else to keep in mind as they're on this journey.
I feel like if we were able to insert ads into your speaking, we'd be referencing like 5 or 6 of our previous episodes. We've touched on a lot of those topics, and I think it's great that you bring them up because it's super important. I mean, the power of attorney, unless you have to use one, you probably never think of it. So, Paul was talking a little bit about something that popped a thought into my head, which was, we're heading into this aging population, and there is a caregiving shortage, right? It's going to get worse before it gets better. CareCopilot, maybe it's part of the solution, maybe it's not. I'm just curious if you've had thoughts about that, and do you have like a big goal of how many people you're trying to help in the next X period of time?
Yeah, absolutely. So you asked a few things there. First, you asked about the caregiver shortage, and you're absolutely right. And I break that down into two different types of caregivers. So families are getting smaller, people are having fewer kids. So when it comes to unpaid friend and family caregivers, there are simply fewer children, fewer grandchildren to take on the responsibility of taking care of mom, dad, and grandpa. And so that in and of itself is a challenge because it's a challenge if you've got 5 siblings doing it. It's much more of a challenge if you have 2 siblings doing it. And that's why it's even more critical to have a resource like CareCopilot that can efficiently show you exactly what you need and help you instantly book and pay for some of those needs. So from that standpoint, that's absolutely something that CareCopilot has clear vision on and is helping with. The other, I guess, pool of caregivers are these paid aides. And so you can, of course, pay, upwards of $25 an hour, usually, depending on where you live, for someone to come into the home when you're at work and take care of your loved one. There is a growing shortage of those aides because the reality is that taking care of an adult is really hard work. It's very physically exhausting, especially if you have to lift the patient. It's very emotionally exhausting, especially if you're taking care of someone who has dementia that might, curse at you, that might yell at you, say very hateful things. That happens all the time. And frankly, there's lots of other jobs in the service industry where you can get paid just about as much for a lot less stress. And so that's also a really big problem that CareCopilot isn't solving quite yet. We might have something coming soon on that, but not prepared to speak to that yet. But one thing that I can say is as follows. There is a trick or a secret to securing a really high quality aid and keeping them. And the secret is simply respect and compassion. I think that it's very easy if you have someone come into the house to take care of mom while you're working and just do a quick, okay, hello, I'm off to work. And then you come home and it's, okay, I'm here, you can leave. And there's no asking that aide, how did your day go with my mom today? What is going on in your life that I might be able to support you with? How are you doing? I know that my mom can get aggressive or violent at times. I know that that's hard. What can I do to support you? And so when it comes to resolving the paid caregiver shortage, that compassion, that respect, that understanding, and that willingness to really bring that aid in as a part of your family and treat them as a part of your own family and support them emotionally, that is absolutely the secret to just on an individual basis, again, finding and retaining that help. And if all families can get on board with that, mark my words, we would have much less of a caregiver crisis.
Just real quick, there was a Wall Street Journal article not too long ago that talked about the cost of care, and the family highlighted a few families. One of the family did exactly that. They, they made them part of the family. They asked them how they were doing. They gave them a little extra money during the holidays and things like that. So, the golden rule, right? Do unto others.
It always works.
Yeah, it sounds so simple, but you'd be surprised, caregiving is just so depleting in every imaginable way that it can be hard just to take that step back and, go and
it's interesting
make
you bring that up.
Part of the family.
We were caring for my husband's grandparents for a number of years. And one of the caregivers, a lovely, lovely, lovely woman, we did just that. How was your day? How are you? How is your family? So when they both have since passed, but when my grandmother passed most recently, the aide came to the service to see the family and brought this beautiful painted doll. And she said that she painted the doll in, remembrance of Bapji. And she just went down a story. And it was so nice and so sweet to have this individual there who provided so much care and who was so thoughtful through the process that it was like an extension of family, if you will. So that was a beautiful thing. But completely switching gears a little bit. So you talk about, the growth of your company and the work that you're doing and the important services that you provide. Are there services that you're looking to add to your portfolio, or are there partnerships that would help you grow with your business?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I mentioned briefly, this marketplace of services is really the main sort of attraction with CareCopilot because, we've partnered with in-home care agencies to help families get the most high quality and affordable in-home care. We've partnered with law firms to help families, get that attorney who can get them the legal paperwork that we need. And we have a concierge service where people can pay. Right now, it's actually just $20 a month to speak with an expert who can help guide them through some of these challenges. So those are the big three services that we're focusing on right now. But I already know that there are a few other things that a lot of families tend to need help with when they're taking care of an adult loved one. And the additional two that come to mind that will likely be coming to CareCopilot sometime next year are transportation assistance and meal assistance. So, for example, a lot of unpaid friend and family caregivers are having a really hard time making sure that their loved one gets to their doctor's appointment when they have to work because their loved one might not have the physical and emotional wherewithal to get into an Uber. They might not even be able to open up a car door on their own. So transportation is a really big problem. And then food is the one that surprised me, but this has come up very frequently in the, now thousands of conversations that I've had with families who are going through this, where it's surprisingly challenging for, the main unpaid family caregiver to get their salad and get the kids their chicken nuggets and then get dad his dialysis friendly meals. I remember speaking with a young woman in the West Coast who was taking care of her father who was on dialysis. Apparently, you can't have tomatoes if you are on dialysis. Her dad loved tomatoes. It was a very big thing. They were always arguing about the tomatoes. And so that food aspect, it seems very small, but it's something that's really come up a lot. And it makes more and more sense to me because, sometimes as people age, their diets change. They might get pickier. If you are from an ethnically diverse background like myself, your loved one might not eat the food that's available via Meals on Wheels and some of the more widely known options. So that's something that comes up as well. So those are definitely two areas, transportation and food, that we're taking a hard look at for next year in terms of adding it to the platform.
Alyse, you've talked and touched upon so many important elements of what families may be looking to do, not knowing where to go and all of that. And so I think that's really great. What would you say, again, going back to you don't know what you don't know, what are a couple of key takeaways for our audience that if they're either starting the caregiving journey or they're already in the middle of it, that would be helpful to them? And then I do want to touch upon the empathy and relationships, right? Because life's all about relationships. So I loved that story you told. Laura, I loved your story. And my grandmother, God rest her soul, she passed away several years back, but she had Alzheimer's and she went through quite a few home health aides. And I say went through because she's pretty not pleasant to be around. And she was a little lady, but she was very powerful. And finally, her last caregiver would sing to her. And it was like my mother and I would say she was so soothing. And that seemed to work for my grandmother. And, again, so I'm smiling, but I remember that. And, sometimes you do have to find humor because of the pain that goes with it. So I know I've just made a comment, but I'd like for you to touch upon, again, anything that would be helpful for people who are already started that journey, about to start it, or already right in the middle. What could you share with them that maybe you haven't talked about so far?
Now an ad from one of our sponsors. Remember when you could trust the news? Well, then check out Walter. Walter is the free, no-nonsense newsletter for grown-ups that comes to your inbox 3 times a week. From current trends, aging in place, travel, retirement, and everything in between, including a dash of pop culture trivia and throwbacks, Walter is a great way to start your mornings and to stay informed. Oh, and did we mention that it's free? Check us out at thisiswalter.com. Get smart. Get Walter.
Yeah. I've already touched on a few of these, but I'll condense it to sort of the top things that I would love people to know who are going through this. Number one, it sounds a little corny, but bear with me. It really is the fact that you're not alone if you're going through this. There are so many challenges in life that are really common, but that people don't talk about. So it feels uncommon and it's easy to feel alone. And caring for an adult loved one is absolutely one of those challenges. And it's very easy to feel isolated, but this is a very, very common problem. And I harp on that because I think that just knowing the scale of the problem and knowing that no one has this figured out, everyone's struggling to make it work, everyone's piecemealing together a solution, just knowing that can be really, really sanity saving. The other thing that I'll say is that there really are actually a lot of resources out there that can help you when taking care of an adult loved one. Most major cities in the US have some sort of like society on aging or agency of aging, and they have free adult daycare where you can send your loved one to for a few hours during the day. They usually do have some sort of free meal delivery program. There usually is some sort of non-medical transportation program that you can tap into. And so the other big thing that I'll say, because it's really hard to Google for this stuff and hard to find this stuff, the problem is not that there's not resources out there. It's not that it doesn't exist. There's a discovery problem. It's really hard to Google and find or even know to ask, is there a device out there that can help me safely lift my dad to and from the wheelchair when he weighs 200 pounds and I weigh, 130? There is. It's called a Hoyer lift, but I didn't even know to ask that. There is a lot that's out there. It's just a discoverability problem, and that's the exact problem that CareCopilot solves.
Yeah, we're close to the top of our program, but this has been fascinating. As Joseph said, I think you've touched on so many topics of other people's episodes, little pieces. I think what you're doing to put it all together is terrific. We had who was it, Laura? We had on back in Las Vegas, a woman who's doing the food delivery program for Medicaid recipients. We've seen a lot of interesting developments, sort of the food as medicine model.
Mm-hmm.
The question I have is a little more personal. Like, okay, very curious. Venmo to this. Obviously, we kind of understand your why here, but or at least part of it. What did you take with you from Venmo that you were able to apply here? And as a founder, it's a whole different animal. What have you learned that's new that you've surprised yourself on your journey?
I would say that the biggest learning isn't one that Venmo taught me. It's one that, if anything, Venmo taught me the opposite of. And for context, I was really in the inner circle of Venmo. I was one of the more senior software engineers. I was working on actual features, products that were used by millions of people. There are 50 million people and counting using code that I personally have written at my time at Venmo. And I was one of the star performers. I got lots of great feedback internally, externally, and it felt great to be a part of the Venmo family. Venmo was a great place to work. The work was challenging, but not overly challenging. I was working with a lot of very validating and supportive individuals. And then I started my own company, and all of that went away. And all of a sudden, I didn't have someone telling me how great my code was. I didn't have someone validating that I was on the right track. I didn't have a lot of the emotional safety and security that I had when working at Venmo, because it was such a great place to work. When starting my own company, I was absolutely prepared for the long hours and the losses and the rejections. what was the biggest challenge for me was, committing this era of my life to building something to help people solve the problem that I was never able to solve. And along the way, obviously, getting lots of great feedback from people who are currently using the product, but day after day, having more questions than answers, having more requests than solutions, more problems than solutions. And that was definitely a challenge coming from Venmo. So I don't know, maybe a part of me wishes that Venmo had been a little bit more challenging to prepare me for that. But it's definitely been, the process of running this whole company. I haven't just learned more about caregiving. I've learned so much about myself. I have so much more respect than I already had for people who go on this entrepreneurial journey. It is not for the faint of heart. There's been a lot of tears along the way, but I can truly say in my heart, I've been doing this for 2 years now. There has not been 1 second of one day that I have regretted this process, because I know that now people have the solution that I never had. That was the whole point, and now I've done that.
So you can clearly tell that you have passion for what you do. For those who can't see it, if you saw her face, you would see the passion coming right through the screen. I sort of tried to squeeze a question into my last compounded question, so I'll just bring it back. I feel like there's a mission here, really a mission. Like, do you have a goal of helping a certain number of people or trying to accomplish, something big in the next few years? Forget the financial side of things for the moment, just really on the helping people side.
Yeah. To be honest, Joseph, when I'm speaking with, investors, advisors, I do pull out specific metrics of how many millions of people I want to roll the product out to this year, next year, the year after. But the real answer is that if I can just make a difference in the life of one family, if I can just help one family go from, I don't know what to do, I don't know where to start, to I've got this, I can do this, and I can spend the last few years of my loved one's life enjoying them instead of worrying about their care. If I can do that for just one family, it'll all be worth it.
I love that. And I usually ask, the why question, what is your why? But I think you've covered it in both Paul and Joseph. So I'm going to switch it up a little bit. And this may be difficult, so I'll change it slightly. But say, 80, 90 years from now, what is one thing you want to be remembered for?
So a lot of that is tied up in identity. So for those who can't see me, I am a Black American woman, and it's pretty rare still to this day to see a successful tech startup from someone who identifies as I do. There just aren't that many people who look like me who are wildly successful in this game. And a lot of that is due to bias and lack of resources. And, there's still less than 300 women in the US who have raised over $1 million in venture capital. And I'm pretty darn close to joining them. And so when I think about the future, 80 years from now, I want to be remembered as one of those women who changed that statistic and who did so helping people along the way. This isn't an AI startup. This isn't a crypto startup. I'm not building a nice to have. I'm building a have to have. And so I want to be remembered as one of those women who changed that very dire statistic and was able to help families at the same time. That's something that's really important to me.
So, Alyse, how can individuals get a hold of you or companies if they're interested in your products and services? What's the best way?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. You can go to carecopilot.co. There is a contact page there. Me and my team actually do read every message that comes through. So if you want to get a hold of me, please reach out there.
Well, Alyse, listen, thanks so much for your time. Love your mission. I think you gave a great answer to Joseph. People don't understand. I think sometimes, we're all conditioned to say, if you haven't had 1 million downloads or 1 million views, I'm not worth that much. But really, one person changing one life can have a tremendous ripple effect, over many years. So good luck on your venture. And we will put all that information in the show notes. Anything we can do to help, let us know. Joseph, Laura, Mary, thanks so much. Thanks to our listeners. And be sure to tune in again next week for another really interesting episode of the Prime Life Podcast. Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Remember to subscribe to the Prime Life Podcast anywhere you find podcasts. You can find all of our episodes, contact information, and more on our website, primelifepodcast.com. Stay connected with us. Follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.